You're probably wondering, do I need a watch winder? And I guess it depends. But if you really want to know what it depends on, then this is probably going to be the video for you. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the pros and cons of using watch winders, as well as doing a review of Mozsly's Single Watch Winder. So if any of that interests you and you want to know a little bit more about this, and even see an experiment that was conducted to kind of see what the impacts on watch winders are, make sure to stay tuned throughout the rest of the video. If this is your first time here, welcome to Wrist Unwound. And I'm Tyree, the host, and what we like to do here is talk about where watches and stories meet. And so in today's review, we're going to be talking about the Mozsly Single Watch Winder that was provided to me for free. However, they have no say in this video. What we'll also talk about is not only their watch winder, but all watch winders. We'll talk about some of the pros and cons, and talk about some of the things that you can consider when looking for a watch winder. And additionally, of talking about the Mozsly, we'll also talk about one of the leading competitors as well. But stay tuned to see what is the big difference between this watch brand and that one. All right, guys. So in today's video, key topics that I'll make sure to link in the description down below so that you can skip ahead if you need to. First thing, introduction to the Mozsly's watch winder so that you can understand a little bit more about the brand and the products that they offer. The second thing we're going to look at is the pros and cons of using a watch winder. Some of the research I did, which is mostly watching YouTube videos and reading articles and stuff like that, but I'll kind of consolidate that information for you guys so you can kind of have a comprehensive guide of understanding when you should and should not use a watch winder. Next, we'll dive into the settings on this one and how to properly use a watch winder for your particular device. And then last off, we'll just kind of go over some overviews, pros and cons, and I'll give you my final takes on if I would recommend this watch winder as well as any watch winder for you in your collection. So let's go ahead to the first point and let's talk a little bit more about Mozsly as a brand so you understand who you're working with. So when it comes to Mozsly watches, what all do they produce? So they produce single, double watch winders as well as a couple other accessories. Now when it comes to their watch winders, they produce them in a variety of colors. In this box here you see some of the carbon, the black, the brown leather, the more of the orange leather, but the colors are actually quite expansive. They produce orange, brown, black, carbon fiber, space metal, green, classic wood, space metal, blue leather, purple, red, light blue. And probably a few more by the time I release this video. So you can find their different single watch winders on both Amazon and on their website, and we can talk a little bit more about the difference there because it does have an impact on the price. And as well as they have double watch winders, which come in a couple different colors as well, just not as many as the single. One of the benefits of their winders is that they can be linked together, so that's just one more thing to think about. If you want to do multiple singles, maybe in a different color or in a pattern, or if you prefer to have that double, so you have those two sitting right there together. So now let's talk about the pros and cons of using a watch winder. So one of the things that Mozsly talks about on their website is taking the utmost care in their watches. In the website, it states that there's over 20 craftsmen that come together to make sure that every watch winder is made professionally and made to a standard that they would want for their own watches. Now, one thing I will note, it does say made in China on there, which doesn't mean that the 20 craftsmen aren't in China, but to me that says that they're probably more machine made and not handmade, but I'm sure that there's still craftsmen overseeing that. I'm just giving you the facts that they say on their website, but I just want to give you that context as well because I saw that on the box. Lastly, the mission of Mozsly is to enhance the watch wearing experience for collectors everywhere. They want to make sure you have a product that when you're ready to wear your watch, it's ready to go and it's in a good operating position. And I think that kind of brings us into the next phase of this conversation is why would you or anyone want a watch winder? And so particularly for me, why do I use watch winders? Because when it comes to certain automatic watches in particular that have multiple complications, it is easy to put it on a watch winder so that those complications are still going. So my personal use case, I have well over 100 watches, many of them being automatic. And so when you take a watch such as the one I'm wearing on my wrist right now, which is the Timex M79 day date feature, I don't wear it as often as I probably could. In particular this one with other watches, I don't want to have to reset the day and date every time I pick it up. So one of the uses that I use the watch winder for is if I know I'm going to be wearing a watch soon and I don't want to have to set it the day of, I'll put it on the watch winder, make sure it's set correctly, and that way it maintains the correct complications. Now, another use case for that as well is if you have a watch that has a very complex complications or multiple complications. So whether that be a GMT function, a calendar function, it has day, date, and all of those functions. Using a watch winder can be very useful in those circumstances to maintain that so that you're not having to reset it all the time if you're one of the people who needs that information to be correct. Now with the pros and use cases, there's also the cons and the fears of what using a watch winder can be. So one of the fears of using a watch winder is that it's gonna overwind your watch. And what that means is that the automatic movement is going to be basically overused and potentially cause stress on the movement that can cause it to either break or not actually be as accurate, and leading to you need to get it serviced earlier. So when it comes to should you use it, it depends. There are some watchmakers who say absolutely not. And there's some watchmakers who say, of course, I use it myself. There's some luxury watch people who say, I would never touch that. And there's some people who say they do. It really is just gonna depend on what you're looking for and what you want. But I think the key thing is a watch winder is not gonna hurt your watch as long as you're using it properly. And to use it properly, you need to understand the settings behind it. And that's why in the next section, we'll talk about the settings of this watch winder as well as what settings you need to look for. So when you're looking for a watch winder and trying to find the right watch winder for you, the first thing is to understand the settings. And so I think this is the perfect time for me to bring out the watch winder so that you can take a look at it and then also understand some of the settings and how they impact your watch. And so with this Mozsly Single Watch Winder, you're looking at clearly a single watch. This watch winder is going to be 5.5 inches long, 4.25 tall, 4.25 inches wide. And it comes in multiple colors as I mentioned previously, and I think this is the carbon fiber. It has an acrylic viewing port window, which we can talk about a little bit more when it comes to different watch winders later. It also comes with 2 different pillows. And so in this pillow, we have more of a scrunchie so that you can adjust different types of watches to that pillow. You also have their second pillow, which is more of a rubbery foam. Just depends on the type of watch that you're trying to get set in there. Now, the settings and things that you're looking for a watch winder, particularly for safety reasons, or I guess not safety, but to protect your watch, are going to be the settings that are on the back. And so for this one, a couple things. This one has both an in and out so that you can plug it directly into the wall, but it also has a AA battery so that you have the ability to use that. But where the settings become important for your particular watch and making sure that it's taken care of properly is understanding the turns and then the speed. And so for the turns, you want a watch winder that can turn clockwise, counterclockwise, or both. This is going to depend on the type of watch that you have and understanding the movement that you have. And then the next setting you need to understand is how many turns per day that it has. So in this one, with setting 1 is 650 turns per day. Setting 2 is going to be 900 turns per day. Setting 3 is 1200 turns per day. And setting 4 is going to be 15 turns per day. Now, a great video that I would highly recommend watching if you want a little bit more detail, not only about this winder, but also experimenting with watch winders, comes from the page On the Wrist. And so what he did is he took one of his Seiko pieces and he measured where the power reserve was, and he set it to the different settings to see what the impact on the power reserve was so you can understand the impacts on the watch. And so on setting 1, which is the 650 turns per day, his power reserve remained constant. What that tells us is that is probably the best setting that you want, making sure your watch is not fully wound when you put it on there, and so that it is maintaining its movement, but it's not at risk of becoming overwound. At setting 2, which is 900 turns per day, it increases power reserve from 10 hours to 20 hours. And so what that is telling you is that over time, if you keep it on setting 2, that's going to continually wind up the watch to the potential of getting overwound. And then on setting 4, which is 1500 turns per day, it was basically 100% wound within just a few hours. And so what that's telling us is that there's a high risk of overwinding your watch if you put it on setting 4. But this all depends on the type of movement that your watch has. And so you need to understand what type of movement, which direction it needs to turn, and that's going to tell you what settings to use when using a watch winder, whether it be Mozsly's watch winder or any company out there. One of the cons about some of the cheaper companies or some of the other brands, they don't always tell you how many turns per day they have. And so that is a critical thing to think about when you're trying to select a watch winder for your collection. The next thing to look at is the build quality. I think that they did a really good job at this, especially for the price in which you're paying. It's very well constructed. It's aesthetically pleasing. Sorry, words are hard. I think that the different colors gives you a lot of different variety a lot of different options. And you could tell they did a lot of, they did focus on the detail and making sure that this is a well-designed watch. And I encourage you to look at some of their other ones. They all look great. It just depends on your particular taste. The next thing is the sound of operation. This one is incredibly quiet. Let me turn it on and off to see if you can hear the sound. Turn the button. You probably can't hear anything because that's how quiet it is. Having a quiet watch winder I think is really important, especially if you want to keep this watch winder near you, such as in your bedroom or near your bedside. It is very, very quiet. Obviously, if you listen very, very closely to it, you might be able to hear something, but more than likely not, because they did such a good job. And that's one of the concerns you have to worry about when you're buying one of the cheaper brands. I've heard of other watch winders that they have that audible motor noise. You can hear that buzzing. And so this one doesn't have that, and I think that's definitely a pro for why you should pick up the Mozsly watch winder. The last thing I think that's a really important pro to why Mozsly beats out a lot of the competition is the settings. Having the settings from 900 to 1200 to 1500 to the different turns per day is critical, because while my watches and the Seiko typically need to be on the lower end, maybe you have a watch that needs more turns per day, as well as having watches that can both clockwise, counterclockwise, and both. I have a couple of my watches that only are wound a certain direction, and so having settings like that I think are critical in making sure your watch winder is versatile for multiple types of watches. And so that's another consideration that I think that makes Mozsly stand out from other watch winders out there on the market. One of the cons that people might have with this winder is actually going to be in the lid. So having this acrylic crystal is one thing that could frustrate some, because long term it is going to be more prone to scratching, which could affect the look of the watch winder. So maybe if you were to buy, if that's something that you concern, maybe buying a more luxury piece, you could probably either get real glass or a different material that's going to be less prone to scratching. Another con that people have is actually going to be with the cushions. And so with this cushion here in particular, it did take me a second to kind of squeeze it in and break it in. It wasn't like I wasn't able to, but that is something that, you know, it is worth noting, that all watches may not fit very comfortably, as well as I didn't end up using this one, but you know, depending on the size of your wrist or the size of your bracelet, you may have some concerns on trying to get this one to fit your watch well. And so that's just one consideration to taking a look. And when you're buying any type of watch winder, what are the size of the cushions and what are the size of your wrists, and making sure you find cushions that are compatible. The next one is going to be the price point. And I don't know if this is quite a con, but just something that I noticed that was interesting. The price point from Amazon and the website were actually different, ranging about a $7 difference. Sometimes it was between 83 and 86. On Amazon, it was typically around 89 on their website. So that's just, maybe it'll be different by the time you're watching this video, but that is one thing I think that you need to take in consideration, is making sure you're looking at where are you purchasing it from and are you getting the lowest price. I wish that they had more consistent prices, but I'm sure there's some reason, big business reason, that is beyond me. The other con is, this is more for just watch winder generals, is understanding you probably shouldn't keep your watches on there 24/7. You know, make sure you're getting your watches out in the wild and using them, and maybe also sometimes just letting them die and let that power reserve go down to 0, just so the watch isn't overwound. That's just something I think consideration for good watch health. Obviously it's up to you and if you're what you're looking for like servicing of your watches, but I think for any watch winder, you probably shouldn't keep your watch on there 24/7. But if you're using the correct settings, you're taking into account the power reserve, and you're making sure to check it, I think you'll have no issues using this watch winder or any watch winder, as long as you properly understand the settings. So we kind of talked about some of the cons. What are the other competitors out there? And so there's going to be a lot of different companies that you actually find under this price point. However, I didn't find any that I personally would want to use. That doesn't mean that they don't exist out there, but I think for me, one of the biggest things is having those multiple different types of settings and turns per day, and a lot of the cheaper options don't offer that. The other things that are some of the cheaper options that I've heard and read on the reviews is they're going to be a lot noisier. And so having something that can sit there off to the side of my desk, not become a distraction, just be something to look at, that's an important factor for me when I'm looking for a watch winder. The best competitor that I've seen is actually on the more luxury and expensive end, and that's going to be a Wolf watch winder. Now these look gorgeous, and one of the cons that some of these have is not only do they have a case on the front, but they also have a lock so you can protect your watches. The big con is about the money. Those watch winders, the single watch winders in particular, are starting out at $600. So for one single Wolf watch winder, you're going to be able to pick up 6 of these. That's including taxing and shipping. So it all depends on your budget. You know, when it comes to watch collecting, the price range is very wide. Some people consider an affordable watch to be $20 to $100. Some people consider an affordable watch $3K to $5K. So when it comes to watch winders, I imagine it's the same thing. For me, $80 to $100 is a pretty decent amount of money to spend on a winder. But some people who have $20,000, $30,000 watches, what is $600 for a watch winder? And so understanding what your budget is going to be huge, and maybe you're looking for those more luxury features. But for the average collector, most people, I think that this watch winder is going to suffice in getting you what you need for a great price and accomplishing all of the major needs. In summary, the Mozsly watch winder is a great, cost-effective, beautifully designed solution for you if you're searching for a watch winder. We talk about the pros and cons of using these. I think if you use them well and you use the right settings, you'll have no issues using this in the future. And I think that this is a great product to add to your collection and another great way to display your watches. If you made it this far and you found the video useful, please make sure you like, leave a comment, and let me know what other videos you're looking for in the future. And then also make sure to subscribe. As I continue to push out videos, I want you to be notified, and you can see and be a part of this journey for us as we move forward. Thank you guys for tuning in. This is Tyree. God bless and peace.